everyone. This is Greg Knox, and you are listening to the Lament Configuration Horror Podcast. Once again, after a long time away, I am joined, as always, by Ria Fend.
Thank you, Greg. And yes, it has been a 7-year hiatus, and we are back for a reunion episode. And we are back and darker than a shadow in a bottomless pit. So
it's pretty dark.
That's pretty dark. So as before, for any listeners who listened to us back in the day, we do have some graphic themes in this show occasionally. Spoilers can be known to be exposed, and we are definitely uncensored because it's our show and we'll do what the fuck we like.
I'm actually trying to swear less these days because I was listening back. I don't know if you've done this since we agreed to do the show, but I've listened back to a lot of the old episodes of the show and I was very angry back in those days. I used to rant and rave like a madman, let's just say. So yeah, I try not to swear as much. That's not to say I won't swear, because I will. Some will come out. But yeah, I was just like, God, I just sound really angry.
Yeah, so no unnecessary swearing. Well, there may be a little, but Greg Knox sounds like he's reformed in the last 7 years.
A reformed character, yes. I've done my best. Have you listened to any of the shows since we agreed to?
Yeah. I have listened back.
Okay. What was your favourite episode that we did back in the day?
Do you know what? I'm not sure because I haven't listened to all of them like this year, but actually the summary one that we did at the end was a good show. We were well in the swing of it then. We were recording like so regularly.
Yeah. The ones like around the 30 range, it took a few episodes for us to get in the groove. But yeah, once we got to like episode like 15 and we were doing them so regularly, yeah, it got really, really good. I mean, my kind of favorites generally were when we were talking about bad films and just having fun with them. Mm-hmm. I think my favorite would either be when we did Blood Feast.
Yeah.
That was fun. Don't Go in the Woods. Mm-hmm. That was a hilarious episode just because so many stupid things happen in that film and it's just so much fun to talk about.
Yeah.
So yeah, any kind of films that are just shit but kind of funny shit, if that makes sense. So yeah.
So anyone who's just joining us for the first time for this episode should know that we covered every video nasty that was on the list from the 80s. All 72. It was 72, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's 72. Although it's grown now because there's Section 3. Section 3 wasn't really a thing when we did the show. So yeah, so it's technically more than 72, but it's 72 really.
Yeah. And I mean, the next thing I want to ask about is, I mean, let's catch up. What have you been up to over the 7-year hiatus?
Wow. So I did a podcast called Worst 8 Movies Ever, which was a lot of fun. I did it for a few years, did it up until a couple of years ago. It was more because I enjoyed podcasting. I wanted to continue podcasting. I had this idea to kind of cover disturbing films that weren't just horror. Like, I like talking about horror, but there's kind of more to me than that. So I wanted a show where I could talk about, I don't know, like the guinea pig films, but I could also talk about sort of Sarlo, like art house type films. And I wanted to keep on talking about them with my friends. So in the first series, like I had Tom Dennick come on a few times to talk about, Nazis, his favorite subject, and like Cannibal Holocaust and Sarlo. And, I had a few other of my friends come on as well. And then it kind of, I wasn't able to bring people on as much. So I was doing the podcast by myself, which is not as fun.
Yeah.
So, it had a good run. I had fun doing it. I learned a lot.
Yeah.
I think I'm a much better podcaster now. I hope, touch wood. People think so. And at the moment I'm focusing more on music. So I'm in 2 bands at the moment. One has literally just recorded its like debut EP.
Yeah.
And the other one will be recording soon. Doesn't have a name yet.
Yeah.
Kind of needs a name. But yeah, they're both metal bands playing bass. So I'm kind of back to doing that. And just doing all right, basically.
Oh, that sounds
What
awesome.
about you? You've been very busy. So when we were doing the show before, you were doing a lot of modeling.
Yeah.
You were trying to get into acting. So yeah, what's happened over the last sort of 7 years?
Yeah, quite a lot's happened. I stepped away from modeling. I did that for quite a long time. I went more into acting, and I've got quite a few little roles in things, most notably the Apple Warner Brothers TV series called Ted Lasso. I had a little cameo role once per season, so I worked across it for 3 years, which was super interesting, really cool. And I was a body double and stand-in for the lead actress, who's Hannah Waddingham.
And she's doing a lot now.
She's doing a lot, yeah. So that was like really good fun. I mean, that was like an education in film and TV in itself, just working with all these like super talented people. So I absolutely loved that. I did some independent horror movies like Eating Miss Campbell, which I know that you've seen as well.
It's available now?
Yeah, it is. And it screened at Fright Fest. So I went down for the premiere to that, which was a lot of fun to work on. And, some other bit parts in different shows and films. And I decided that I wanted to write my own films, and that, I'd really love to get into screenwriting. So I've been doing that around my creative day job, which is as graphic designer. And I've written a couple of movies, and one of them should be going into being made soon. And it's a horror movie.
Exciting stuff.
Really exciting. So yeah, that should come about this year, but we'll see. As with everything in film, it always probably takes longer than you think.
Yeah.
So it's a British horror movie with strong female role in it, that's the kind of thing that I like to write. And it's super violent and fast paced. And yeah, it'll be really exciting if that gets made this year. So I can't wait for that.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, maybe it'll be at Fright Fest.
Maybe one day.
Let's one day. Cool. Super exciting stuff. No, I hope it does get made.
Yeah.
Generally, yeah. Awesome. So we are here to talk about, the last 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
It's been, what were you doing in 2010?
Well, so one thing that I actually realize is that this exercise I've obviously been preparing for, because I've got my notes, because 15 years is, that's 15.
It's a very long time, yeah.
Yeah, 15.
It's 15 years, in fact.
15 choices of film, plus I have, some honourable mentions alongside the main pick, because sometimes it's not easy to choose one film from that year. But what I realised was that I actually didn't start using IMDb to log films, which is what I did first.
Yes.
Until 2014, that's when I started doing that. Before that, I just used to watch them and not log them anywhere, not record this stuff. And then Letterboxd, I didn't start until 2018, and then I started adding ratings to the film. So this exercise would have probably been a lot easier if I actually had a record of what I watched when and what I watched during whatever year. So I had to do quite a bit of research. Maybe
remember, have I seen this? When did I see this?
Yeah. And I might have even, not seen some films online when I was researching this. I actually watched in that year, so I might have missed some decent films off the list. There might have been something that I preferred, but I just did heavy research on the years that were not on my Letterboxd, and then Letterboxd actually makes things a whole lot easier.
Oh yeah, it's great. It's taking over the world.
It is. We're both on Letterboxd, by the way, if anybody wants to follow us.
Yeah. No, we are both on Letterboxd. I started using IMDb in 2008, I think.
Yeah.
So I was all right for this. I didn't have the same issue that you had.
Mm-hmm.
So I had all my ratings and stuff.
It was it was fun to kind of look back, and it does show like how much sort of the style of horror has changed, and also like there were some years that were a bit lighter on releases that were kind of hard to choose.
Very hard, yeah.
it does look like recently we've had a little bit of a boost and there's like a bit more to choose from. There's like a bit more diversity, but we'll get into that later.
Yeah. And before we get into sort of talking about each year individually and our picks, how do you feel about 2024? So, looking at 2024 and maybe the start of 2025 as well, I mean, do we think that 2024 was the best year of just the 2020s in terms of horror?
Well, it definitely changed when COVID came along. And then we obviously had a bit of a lull during the COVID period.
I think that's fair to say, yeah.
Which obviously causes, like, for a year afterwards, it causes that lull because of production, and release times. And then after the world and after we recovered from that sort of break and that difficulty in continuing with productions, then there seemed to be a big boost where lots of things came out all at once. There's quite a lot of choice. But then after that, I have noticed that I just think that there have been more releases than there used to be. And it's probably with the boom of streaming and kind of budgets changing. And it does seem like it's kind of picked up. And
there was a writer's strike as well. I think post the writer's strike, I think we're seeing a lot more kind of films that would have come out before have been forced to come out later. So maybe that might have something to do with it as well.
I think so. I think you're right on that one. Yeah. So for me, I think 2023 was a good year. 2022 was a really good year for horror as well. And like looking at 2021 onwards, it's all pretty like decent amounts of horror to choose from.
Yeah.
In my eyes.
You can debate either way. I mean, 2024, we had The Substance, Long Legs, Alien Romulus, First Omen, Heretic, Smile 2, quite a few films that I'm not going to say they're all great and they're not all my cup of tea, but they're good films at least, and people like them, and most of them made money. Even films that are not very good made money. That always seems to be the way with horror. I'm not going to slag off too many films. I promised I would not do that anymore. But yes, there were films that I don't think are particularly very good that made money as well. So I think horror is doing great at the moment. And it's just, I don't know, you could argue either way. It's something we can talk about kind of as the show kind of goes on.
Yeah. I think of all the years to choose, which was my favourite, 2023 was quite a tricky one because there's quite a lot of stuff there to choose from.
Yeah, sure. And we'll go through that sort of when we talk about sort of each year. So just to set the scene, so if we go back to 2010, I was not feeling great about horror at the turn of the previous kind of decade. Like, I'm not a huge fan of the 2000s in terms of horror. Now, there were films that came out in the 2000s that I liked, of course, but generally I wasn't really feeling a lot of kind of the bigger horror films, the more popular horror films, and kind of the different kind of types of horror that kind of came out at that time, some of which we'll discuss in a bit. What about you?
Well, so looking back at my choices in the 2010 years, it looks like, so I'm quite loyal to the franchises that I like, which is going to be stuff like Saw, Final Destination, and any of the kind of James Wan, like Blumhousey type stuff, which today feels like I need something a bit more than that to keep me interested. So this stuff back then was quite new and it was quite interesting and it sort of ticks the boxes in horror. But now it just sort of feels like we need something extra. We need something different than the typical sort of like mainstream releases with jump scares like that. Not that there's anything wrong in that. Like some of these films that I've chosen, I really loved the releases at the time, and they, I still look back on them so fondly and they feel like a staple part of the horror scene. But some of these feel a bit, formulaic. So I think these days I'm looking for something a bit different, and that's just a change in taste, and just because I watched so many as well.
Yeah. I was going to say two things. First of all, your taste definitely has changed. Like even from afar, like I could tell that, like, because when we were doing the show, so back in like 2016, 2017, I was kind of snooty one, should we say, who was like, oh, these films are shit, blah, 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 blah. And you were like, oh, the Rob Zombie thing. Right?
Yeah.
Now, ironically, I did Rob Zombie kind of on Worst Date Movies Ever. I did a show about Devil's Rejects and kind of have a bit more of an appreciation about Rob Zombie now and Eli Roth in a way.
Yeah. I mean, I'm such a big diehard Rob Zombie fan. I'll pretty much watch anything he puts out. So,
which is great. But like, yeah, that was kind of the dichotomy that we had before. Whereas now, like, well, your taste had changed and you watch more movies than me now. So when we get to like the 2020s, it's going to be very interesting because, you watch so much more than I do.
It's a big switch up, but it does feel like that there's this whole new kind of bevy of like sort of genre crossovers or genre blends that are available. Like it sort of became like horror meets something else in every kind of movie because, the straight horror thing, it got done so much. And yeah, it's surprising because we've gone from that point when you were like introducing me to Giallo, which is...
well, of course, that's what I do.
Is necessary,
I introduce everyone to Giallo.
I needed that in my life. And now we've come to this point where it's like I'll pretty much watch every new horror release that I can get my hands on, but I'll watch other stuff as well. And it all contributes towards writing my own movies, which,
Cineworld Unlimited.
Yeah. The beauty of the unlimited card.
Yeah, exactly. This is a good advert for Cineworld Unlimited. Cool. Very quick before we kind of actually get on with the actual picks themselves. So in terms of whether a film is or isn't horror, because this always comes up in a discussion like this, the way I've done it is if Letterboxd says it's a horror film, it's a horror film.
Okay.
Pretty much. And also, in terms of the releases, I think some of these will be more obvious than others. Because we're in the UK, some of these films come out in different years than maybe it says kind of if you look them up.
Yeah.
So we'll give Nosferatu as a good example for this. Nosferatu, if you look it up, it says it came out in 2024, which it did. In America, it came out on Christmas Day.
Yeah.
Whereas here, it came out on New Year's Day 2025.
Yes.
So for the UK, it's a 2025 release.
Okay. And that applies to quite a few films. So when I was choosing my picks, I have tried to check the release date for the UK, and I'll be including my picks for the year that it got released in the UK.
Excellent. So let's get started. So yeah, 2010. What have you chosen?
So I have, once again, sticking to one of my favorite franchises, I've gone with Saw 3D, which is not going to be what Greg chose.
No, it really isn't.
It's directed by Kevin Gruter. Is that how you'd say his name?
Yeah, let's just say if it's wrong, I'm sorry, Kevin.
Okay, and starring Chester Bennington. I mean, this is one of the reasons why I chose this because rest in peace. Yeah. I mean, it's not my favorite of the Saw franchise, but I love the Saw franchise. And I know that to some horror fans, this might be too cliche or you've seen too many. You think that there are too many Saw films coming out, but I literally will go and watch every Saw film that comes out. And most of them I love, maybe with the exception of a couple. But yeah, I actually haven't got a second choice film on this list. I went with that. I think maybe this year was a little thin on the ground. And this year, most notably, was the release of a Serbian film. So that's a controversial one.
Which is the last film that I covered on Worst Date Movies Ever.
So it was, I feel like maybe this was a bit of a trim year for horror.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. So I did not expect you to say Saw 3D. That's completely thrown me for a loop, I think.
Interested to hear what yours is.
So it was very hard to try and pick something that came out 2010. Not a great year. My film that I've picked, actually, again, if you look it up, it said it came out in 2009, but it wasn't shown here till 2010. And that's a film called The Loved Ones.
Oh,
which
interesting.
Is a Australian film, which is directed by Sean Byrne, who also directed a film called Devil's Candy, which I really like. And it's a pretty good film. For the type of film that it is, I think it has kind of a lot going for it. Like it does. So it's a torture porn film. Basically, for anyone who's not seen it, it's about essentially a guy who this girl asks him out to go to prom. He says no because he's got a girlfriend. Fair enough. and then essentially her and her dad kidnap him and torture him.
Okay, yeah.
As you do.
I've seen this film, and yeah, it's cool. It's pretty cool.
It's pretty cool fun, but it's not as nasty as a lot of these types of films. First of all, because generally with a torture porn film, it's a woman being held hostage by a creepy guy. You know, they had incels, but they weren't called incels back in at this point. But yeah, it would be a film like Captivity, which is just, a woman being held captive by an incel and then tortured for an hour, and it'd be very boring. What this film tries to do is kind of do something a little bit more interesting. It's a little bit more kind of slightly more developed characters. And I like the director's style. And yeah, it was pretty slim pickings for 2010. Gotta be honest.
Yeah. I think I didn't know what you were going to choose, but it makes sense now that that's a very Greg Knox style choice. And
yeah, kind of.
We're getting a good balance here of the mainstream and the like lesser known indie film, which if you haven't seen The Love Bonds and you're a horror movie fan, please go watch it.
Yeah, it's pretty good. You could have also picked the Nightmare on Elm Street remake.
Yeah, well, it was okay, but I'm so loyal to the original franchise. I just don't think I loved it enough.
So, as well as A Nightmare on Elm Street, you have, Let Me In, which is the remake of Let the Right One In. Yep. There's The Crazies, there's Piranha, there's I Spit in Your Grave, there's Wolfman. So, one thing that hasn't changed, so a lot of things have changed from the start of the decade to now, but one thing that has not changed is the number of remakes that are coming out, of which, that proves that there's quite a few. And there are even remakes now. Yeah. Remakes are the one thing that you can't kind of avoid.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on remakes just generally? I mean,
sometimes I'm enjoying them, and sometimes it's a case of if I felt like the first one couldn't be topped, it's kind of wish that they would leave them alone. And it's tricky, really, because sometimes, I'm 100% behind them revisiting something with better technology and like a different style. But I would also like to see more original material just coming out. I don't think we're taking enough chances on original spec scripts, which is what I'm trying to write.
Yeah.
But I do like the running theme that we have through all of the ones we're going to talk about today is sequels, remakes, and franchises that return. And yeah, as a horror fan, I always have time to watch these, especially if it's something that I've previously enjoyed. But I do think we need more original stuff coming out as well.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to do a remake, if it's like The Thing or The Fly, cool, great. But I think a lot of the remakes are just like, oh, we have this property. And one of the things that's changed over the last 15 years is this whole concept of intellectual property. So it's like, we have this intellectual property and we want to make money out of it. Let's just do that.
Yeah.
How many more versions of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre do we need? Yeah. See 2022 Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which is shit, apart from when the guy threatens to cancel Leatherface, which is hilarious. I'm going to cancel you, bro.
It was okay.
It's not very good.
Yeah.
And I mean, even for the rest of, coming up, we've got a new I Know What You Did Last Summer.
Scream just keeps going and going.
It's moved to the 90s now in terms of what's being remade. So apparently there's a new Audition, there's a new Idle Hands, Faculty, and the one that I'm kind of very scared of is there's going to be a remake of Possession by the guy who directed Smile 2, Parker Finn, which I'm like, and again, do we need to touch that?
I really love the original, so I'm not sure about that, but we'll find out.
Yeah.
I'll let you know. So anyway.
2011.
So my number one pick is going to be Insidious, directed by James Wan. I had a little bit of a tricky time choosing it. Again, it feels like this particular year is a little thin on the ground for horror. Like some of the other years that we're going to talk about, there's a lot of choice. My honorable mention or kind of second place would have to be Final Destination 5, featuring Tony Todd, who I love, rest in peace. And yeah, both of these are in the series or in universe, like I'm talking about with Insidious with James Wan. It's very Blumhouse, so lots of movies that he's directed and produced in this vein that are all staples in the horror world. And at this stage in 2011, some of this stuff was like really quite groundbreaking and new. So I have to hold this in high regard, even though probably now looking back, it feels a bit like we've seen this many, many times. But James Wan is always so good at what he does, and I love him as a director. And with his company now, Atomic Monster, he's like really doing great things. So this was also the year of Kill List, which was a notable movie. And weirdly, when I was doing research on this, some people had mentioned we need to talk about Kevin, which I don't think is a horror movie, is it?
I don't think that was a horror film, no.
Yeah, I just thought I'd check in about that because, yeah, it's pretty horrific, but don't think it's a horror movie.
No, it's disturbing, but yeah, not a horror film for me. Very interesting that you mentioned Kill List because that is my choice.
I thought it would be. Good old Ben Wheatley.
Yeah, so I love Kill List. I remember very distinctly when I saw it. So it was playing at Fright Fest, but it sold out. Mm-hmm. And I read about it in Empire and I got quite excited about it. And it was playing like literally the week after Fright Fest is when it came out.
Yeah.
And I saw it in Soho. It was me and maybe about 3 other people because it was like the middle of the day. Mm-hmm. And it just blew my mind because it changes about 2 or 3 times during the film, kind of what it is, because it starts off as this like kind of very like low budget, very grounded, kind of almost like kitchen sink sort of drama.
Yeah.
Then it becomes like this hitman movie, which is what it is for the most part. And then it takes a twist in the last third that I kind of don't want to spoil.
Yeah.
If you haven't seen it. And at the time, people were like, oh, this is a very abrupt shift and it doesn't make sense. It does make sense if you watch the film again and kind of see kind of the clues, if you want to call them that, the signs.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's Ben Wheatley's best film by far. And yeah, it's one that I come back to and I own it on Blu-ray. It's
excellent.
Awesome.
I mean, I'm a big Ben Wheatley fan. I love like a lot of his movies. And I would say that in terms of British folk horror, he's done like big things for that genre. And
A Field in England.
Definitely.
Yeah. Which is another film that came out about this time.
And then what was that one that he did a couple of years
In the
ago?
Earth.
Yeah, that was very folk horror as well.
Yeah. So he loves his folk horror.
Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned sort of for 2010, so you mentioned Saw 3D,
mm-hmm.
I mentioned The Loved Ones.
Mm-hmm.
In 2011, we have Megan is Missing, which is not a very good film. Very disturbing kind of last 10 minutes. And yeah, a few other films, like we mentioned a Serbian film, there's a woman, The Woman rather, and yeah, Human Centipede 2. So it's all kind of these torture porn films. Now, it's about this time that torture porn kind of comes to an end. And this was kind of the big kind of horror movement throughout kind of the 2000s that I really wasn't into. Mm-hmm. And it's really around the sort of early part of the 2010s that it died. And it's like, do you miss it? Do you think it will come back? Has it aged well at all, in your opinion?
I think it's almost comes back around in a cycle. So maybe there'll be a bit of a revival with it. I mean, it almost feels like at the moment we're having kind of a bit of a slasher revisit, but with a modern twist, which is interesting because it's not the same as torture porn, but there are obviously similarities.
Yeah.
So I think it had its time then, and then people got kind of bored of just this kind of shock factor, like repetition. And I feel like at this point, we're probably going into jump scare territory.
Yeah, I think people are more easier to, I'm not going to say easier to offend because that's such a cliche these days, but I think people are a lot easier to shock now. So you don't need to kind of go to the excesses that you did like 20 years ago.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But who knows? Like you say, it may come back around. I mean, yeah, I'm not a fan of it, but I just thought, it came up in your previous picks. Yeah. 2012, what have you gone for?
Yeah, so I've gone for, and like recently I've rewatched this movie and I feel like I do hold it in very high regard, even though at the time it probably felt like something that we've seen quite a bit of. But I just really love the dark tone of this movie. I'm going to go with Sinister, directed by Scott Derrickson. And I just think this has some amazing moments in terms of it's a jump scare movie, but it's not like a cliche, like haunted house jump scare movie. It felt quite different. The tone of it felt super, super dark. And I actually found this really scary the first time I watched it. This year, it's 2012. This was a tricky choice. My close second is Cabin in the Woods, which I think if you haven't seen Sinister, you haven't seen Cabin in the Woods, I think these are essential, like, for a horror fan. And this was also like a great year in terms of this was a year of Sightseers, which I love as like an indie movie. I think that's an awesome pick as well. But yeah, Sinister's my number one.
And Sinister's produced by Blumhouse.
Yeah.
Now, at this point, Blumhouse had only really done the Paranormal Activity movies. That's what kind of were most well known for at this point. But obviously, since then, has gone on to do all kinds of like, you know, amazing things. And this is a very interesting time because since like the Hammer horror days, because people talk about the Hammer horror sort of style, like the Hammer Dracula films. So Hammer is like a studio that made those films. And pre kind of the 2010s, people didn't really talk about, oh, this studio have made this film and them having a style. And I think Blumhouse has a style, and A24, which we're going to go on to later, have a style.
Yeah.
Blumhouse is an interesting one. So for those who don't know, kind of what they do is they will kind of develop films, not for a lot of money. They're generally like under $10 million.
Yeah.
But then they're distributed via Universal. So they go out to a lot of kind of cinemas. So they're viewed by a lot of people. And the ones that do well, they make lots of money at the box office. I mean, how do you, I mean, I don't know, I'm up and down with Blumhouse. Some of their stuff I like, some of it I think is very bad indeed. But what are your thoughts on that?
I'm very pro Blumhouse. I think, like you say, so they take chances on things as well with, you know, making things for, like you say, fairly low budget and then giving it a wide release. They can afford to take chances. And I think it's done such a lot for the genre. Like, I'm very pro Blumhouse. I'll pretty much watch whatever they put out. I think some of their stuff, it's not been like my favorite. There've been a couple of things that maybe have been a bit hit and miss, or it's felt a bit too mainstream for me and not had enough kind of storyline or heart. But there's been so much that they've put out there that has literally changed the landscape of horror, and the model that they stick to, like, it really seems to work. I think without them, there just would not be as much content as there is. So I'm like grateful for that, really.
Yeah, I think they're definitely like tastemakers in a lot of ways. And we'll go into this kind of as we go on through the decade. But yeah, like, it's interesting. Like, I read there's a film coming out on Netflix as we're recording this, which is directed by the Russo brothers, which cost something like $320 million. That's getting very bad reviews at the moment. And it's like, well, instead of making one movie that cost $320 million, why don't you make 32 movies that cost $10 million?
Yeah.
You know, and this kind of proves it. Like, horror, for what, you know, whatever you want to say about it, horror movies don't tend to cost that much money because they don't need to. And they have a built-in audience.
I think Blumhouse also give a lot of opportunities to up-and-coming directors to, you know, sort of move into a more notable, big first feature movie. And I've noticed that in this decade, in the 2010 decade, that quite a lot of my first picks are Blumhouse movies. So that's a testament to their business model.
Yeah. I also like Sinister and also like Cabin in the Woods, but that's not the film that I've gone for. So, the early part of the 2010s is not the greatest in terms of kind of the choice. Yeah. So it's more, because bear in mind, these are our favorite films. They're not the best.
Yeah.
So I have gone for a film called Excision,
which
is directed by Richard Bates Jr., and is more like a black comedy with like horror elements in it than like a straight horror film. This film I enjoy a lot. I covered it on Worst 8 Movies Ever. I had a guest, Lucy Buglas, who came on the podcast to talk about it with me. I just really, really like the director's style. He kind of sort of reminds me of like a modern sort of John Waters, but just more polished.
Okay.
You know, he makes these kind of quirky, kind of very low budget, sort of American indie horror / black comedy sort of films that, they just appeal to me. And this one, it's about 80 minutes. It's quite an easy watch. It's got John Waters is in it. Ray Wise is in it. Yeah, it's just, I don't know, I find it a lot of fun to watch.
I haven't actually seen that one, but when I was doing my research, I was like, I haven't seen that. Maybe I should watch it. So I'd definitely be inspired to watch this movie now.
Yeah, it's definitely worth watching. I mean, if it wasn't for that, I might have picked, Cabin in the Woods, or I like the remake of Maniac. That's a pretty good film as well. So I could have picked that as well. But yeah, I've gone for Excision. So what about 2013?
Okay, so sticking with the theme so far, the James Wan.
Is it Blumhouse or James Wan again?
Yeah. I'm going to go with The Conjuring.
Right.
Yeah, I actually really like this movie. It was awesome when it came out at the time, and super dark. And I feel like James Wan was really coming into his own here with just everything that he was working on. It's just going so well, and you've got all of these new horror titles that are in the same universe. Well, in the end, they've all kind of become linked, and they all feel kind of similar, like they're this familiar style. But they're all different storylines in their own right. So it's quite cool that it's like similar but different. And it's not relying on something that we already knew or some kind of remake. It's new material. Second to that, if I hadn't have gone back with the James Wan choice, the Blumhouse choice, I'd have gone with You're Next, which is directed by Adam Wingard, who's someone else who features in my picks, and I like his work. So yeah, The Conjuring, with You're Next as a second honourable mention.
Nah, that's interesting. So I've gone for You're Next.
Oh, so excellent.
You're Next is my choice.
Perfect.
So the reason I like You're Next is, I like Adam Wingard, or at least the Adam Wingard we got in this period. Anyway, very interesting film. It's a lot of fun to watch. Most of the characters aren't likable, bar the kind of main protagonist. And this is the kind of film I think you can kind of get away with them being not likable, because they're kind of unlikable in a different way from a lot of slasher films, because they're this kind of clearly upper middle class or upper class kind of rich family. So they're just rich dickheads as opposed to just dickheads like you get in a lot of these kind of slasher films. Very good sort of final girl.
Yeah.
She's like always comes up when you see like online kind of, people asking like, oh, who's the best final girl in like a slasher film? Like she is always the one that comes up because she's actually very kind of realistic, like as a survivalist.
That was my favorite part of that movie, to be honest.
Yeah.
And I remember when I watched that, I think it might have been a preview at the Prince Charles Cinema, which is our beloved independent cinema in London's West End, who you might have noticed recently had a petition to save the agreement with the landlord that they have to preserve the cinema and keep on going, which I hope happens, because I absolutely love the Prince Charles Cinema. And I remember watching it there in 2013, and it was such a great experience, like with other horror fans, next to you.
It would have been great. I didn't see it with a crowd, but I would have loved to have seen it with a crowd.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah. So it's very interesting. So you've gone for James Wan, and I've gone for Adam Wingard.
Mm-hmm.
Horror directors back in my day, back in like the 70s and 80s, like when you had people like Tobe Hooper or John Carpenter and people like that, they generally stayed in their lane in terms of like, oh, I'm just making horror films and that's it. Whereas James Wan is sort of the first one where he got famous for doing horror films, but then he made a Fast and the Furious movie, and then he made another horror film, and then he would do Aquaman.
Yeah.
And you see this with kind of certain types of horror directors now, like you've seen it with Andy Muschietti, where he would do It, and then he would do The Flash.
Yeah.
Or someone like, Scott Derrickson, who you mentioned earlier, Fede Alvarez, and people like that. And Nia DaCosta is sort of the latest one, where she will do Candyman, and then she will do The Marvels.
Yeah.
So this is interesting. So
it feels like they've all done a Marvel movie at some point.
Yeah, it's like they do like their kind of, they come up through horror and they build their name through horror, and then they kind of get poached, but they get given these kind of big multi-million dollar projects.
Yeah.
And it's always the same kind of horror directors as well, for the most part. It's always these sort of jump scary kind of horror directors, isn't it?
Yeah, it's probably something to do with like box office figures, and then they obviously get trusted for like the huge, like multi-million dollar film projects after that.
Yeah, because jump scare films make money, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And that was what I was kind of going to go on to kind of next, is like, I guess in mainstream horror cinema, the big kind of, type of film that you see is what I call jump scare horror films. So they're generally like haunted house films or supernatural films or possession films where they're just filled with jump scares.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not a massive fan of The Conjuring, but I would say that using kind of The Conjuring and Insidious as examples, like James Wan is good at those types of films.
Yes.
He does those types of films the best. Whereas on the other end of the scale, you get films like, I don't know, Ouija or Winchester or Truth or Dare, which are just total shit, annoying characters. So I promised I wouldn't, but I can't help myself.
Here he goes.
I've been holding it in for too long. No, all right. In the nicest way of putting it, let's just say they're not the best written films.
Yeah.
It's generally, they find an object.
Yeah.
They use it in the wrong way. It goes wrong. They have to go and speak to an old person about the object, and they give a load of exposition. They're there just for that, and then they die, and then it's not really gone at the end and stuff like that. And it's just every 5 minutes is,
I think what you're saying is too many cliches, which, we need more to stimulate us these days. Just pretty much because we've watched so many horror movies, it's like seen it before,
Even in 2024, there was a movie that made a lot of money, like about $50 million worldwide, that I would say is not a very good film, and that is Tarot, which is the same idea as Truth or Dare or Ouija and films like that. Where,
I think it's maybe that kind of tween horror, maybe it's
that's who the audience is, definitely
tapping into that market. So maybe that's why it's there, or maybe that's how it succeeds. I mean, it's not for me.
No. On to more positive things. So 2014, I think this is at this point where things start to pick up in terms of quality for the decade so far.
Yeah. So we're actually recording this on International Women's Day, so this is quite fitting. My number one pick is The Babadook, directed by Jennifer Kent. So I do feel like we're seeing a rise from this point onwards, or maybe just like as well recently with female horror directors and more women in the horror movie space, which is great. Did actually feel like maybe this year was a little bit slim pickings as well, a little bit thin on the ground. I've noted down here that my second choice or honorable mention would be, and I actually don't know if this kind of fits. I feel like it probably isn't a horror, but it maybe feels like a horror. But I've noted down The Guest, which is probably more of a thriller with horror elements.
I'd say so.
Again, it's Adam Wingard, and so that's 2 years in a row that he's had a successful release. Like, in my eyes, I liked the material he put out, so it's worth mentioning. What was your pick, Greg?
So my pick is Under the Skin by Jonathan Glazer, starring Scarlett Johansson. Scarlett Johansson and co-starring Croydon's own Adam Pearson, recently seen in A Different Man, the Sebastian Stan film.
Yes.
In a kind of very kind of memorable it's basically a cameo. But he actually is really good in that film. This is kind of the point where the shift kind of starts to happen towards more kind of like mainstream art house kind of stuff, which is sort of horror. Under the Skin it is a horror film, but it's not an overt horror film. It's a lot more kind of, I guess, because it's a creature and people die and things like that. I guess it's got that going for it, but it's a very kind of unique film. I really love the score as well by Mike and Livy. It's just, awesome. And I've seen it a few times. I remember watching it in Wimbledon at the Curzon with, again, about 5 people, and they all looked very baffled. while it was going on.
Understandable.
And that's an amazing memory that I have from watching Under the Skin. Now, you mentioned Adam Wingard. Now, obviously, I mentioned, You're Next,
and
The Guest, and I really like You're Next as well. Now, Adam Wingard is sort of one of these directors that kind of came to prominence sort of in the early 2010s, along with people like Ty West or the Soska sisters, and people like Joe Begas and Richard Bates Jr., who I mentioned, and Adam Green, and all these kind of different sort of directors who are American, making kind of low budget horror films, but they look good and they've got good scripts and things like that. So that's something that definitely has changed, because I remember back in the 2000s, like low budget kind of films, like you would never see them.
Yeah.
They would go sort of straight to DVD and like you'd hardly ever see them. Whereas films like this, they'll play at Fright Fest, but then they might appear on streaming kind of straight afterwards.
Yeah.
So that, I think, is definitely a positive change that's happened sort of post 2010.
Yeah, it almost feels like, there was a time when we had to order a different region DVD from America to be able to watch something, and then you'd need to have your, DVD player configured to be able to watch that. And things were really difficult to get. And now it does feel like things are more accessible, even if we're not getting the cinema release or even like the art house cinema release that we want. At least we're able to watch it on some kind of streaming platform relatively soon after it's been released in America or elsewhere.
Yeah, and I say like this very kind of fertile ground. I mean, not all the kind of directors sort of go on to do bigger things. I mean, Adam Wingard's kind of the most prominent example. And Ty West to a certain extent. He's not made blockbuster films, but he's done very well for himself.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just curious to say. I find it interesting. I mean, if you look at the films that kind of came out in sort of 2014, sort of in this time, you have films like Spring, which is by Justin Benson and Aaron Moorhead, and you've got Unfriended Tusk, Starry Eyes, Housebound. Just I don't know, it's a very cool period. So this sort of mid-2010s period, you get a lot of kind of interesting kind of, low-budget American films, I would say.
Yeah.
So 2015.
2015, well, this was kind of a difficult choice. There were two that I was, really into in this year. But my first choice is It Follows by David Robert Mitchell. And I absolutely loved this movie. It was just so different than what I thought it was going to be. Also, there's a sequel coming out soon, which is kind of unexpected. That'll be out at the end of this year or early next year, I believe, called They Follow. So I'm excited for that. And my second choice, it was really close because I also love this movie and it blew my mind when I watched both of these movies, is Bone Tomahawk, directed by Craig S. Sala.
So I've also gone for It Follows. It's the first time we've matched.
Wow.
So yeah, no, I love It Follows. I saw it at the London Film Festival kind of the year before.
That's lucky. I wish I'd seen it then.
Yeah, it was great. And yeah, I just remember it feeling again very different from kind of what I'd been used to seeing.
Yeah.
Because as we kind of established, my kind of feeling about horror at the time was not great. So I was kind of anything that was slightly different, slightly more outre, shall we say. I'm like, oh yeah, gotta watch that. And it's just so, very kind of different, more, I don't know, just the way that the shots were made. I haven't seen it for a long time, so my memory's not great. But yeah, I just, very, very clever use of kind of wide shots where you're looking in the background for like, see if someone's coming and are they actually a thing or are they just a person, just an extra in the background. So yeah, I'm curious to see what they do with the sequel though.
Yeah, well, the title They Follow implies that there could be, multiple at the same time, but who knows? There's not really a lot that's been put online. It's all been kept like under wraps. Another thing that I found interesting was that probably from around 2014, like onwards, you get this kind of anxiety sort of horror that comes out. Like even with the Babadook, it's like the mother's anxiety is one of the main themes, and It Follows is kind of a bit of a paranoia, like anxiety fueled movie. And it feels like there was a bit of a turn with horror then in terms of that theme.
Yeah, and that develops kind of as the decade goes on, and that's something I actually want to cover a little bit later on. This is a bit of a random segue, but I mean, how do you kind of follow when movies are coming out now, kind of what's about to come out this year, for example, now compared to, like, let's say 10 years ago?
So I'm trying to think what I actually did 10 years ago. I think it was literally you would look at the cinema listings in something that was like maybe published on paper, like magazines, like maybe film magazines, and like less online, like more kind of what was in print, like in the newspaper. And you would go and see like this big release and you'd talk about it with your friends and, you know, kind of do like a group cinema trip or something like that. And maybe more so now, I'm using my app for my cinema subscription to see what's coming up in the month. You know, you get newsletters from the cinemas that you've signed up to, or kind of become a member of different ones, such as the BFI Cinema in London, Prince Charles Cinema, which I've already mentioned, Cineworld, and then just sometimes, you know, you want to catch something that's a bit smaller and you can go to something like maybe Curzon Cinema or Everyman or something like that for a bit more of a luxury experience. So kind of, I guess, like online reviews, newsletters, and just generally looking at the new releases online of what's coming out.
So I used to have an Empire subscription back at this time. So yeah, I'd read about, oh, this is the films that are coming out this year, and kind of plan, oh, okay, this is kind of interested in that, not so interested in that type thing. And you had Empire, you had Total Film, which no longer exists. It's no longer being published. But yeah, most of how I find out about films now is sort of online, just social media.
Yeah.
Like someone will post about something, there might be like a website link to it. Or you find out, oh, here's what's played at Sundance or South by Southwest or Venice, or like all the different film festivals, or, you know, even something like Fright Fest.
Yeah.
Which every now and again they will have something. Like they had The Substance last year, they had Climax the last time I think that we went together, or one of the last times that we went together. So they will have something like that as like a headlining film. But yeah, it's just interesting sort of how much has changed, and it's basically social media driven these days.
And I have managed to get to more festivals, like since we did our last recording with the podcast. So I've regularly been to London Film Festival. I haven't been to Glasgow Film Festival yet, or Glasgow Fright Fest, but I hear a lot about it. And I've been to Fright Fest a lot, like during the time that we have had off from the podcast. And another way that I find out is just by staying regular at Cineworld or any, you know, mainstream cinema.
You get a lot of trailers.
You get a hell of a lot of trailers. So I'll already know what's coming out the next month. And if I'm seeing a horror movie, I'm going to get all the horror trailers for the upcoming, like, sort
you
of
must
next.
have seen that Speak No Evil trailer like hundreds of times.
So many times.
Yeah.
Yes.
2016.
Okay. I mean, in keeping with the same theme, I mean, this actually feels like this was a really good year for horror, because I've actually struggled to choose on this one. I've got maybe 4 that were like up there at the top. But my first choice is going to be The Conjuring 2, again directed by James Wan. And one of the big reasons for this is because it's set around the story based in North London, and I spent a lot of time living in North London. This is like the Enfield Poltergeist tie-in with this movie, and I just feel like it fitted so well, and it was like built on themes that I've been so curious about, like growing up in Britain. But like I say, this was such a difficult choice because Robert Eggers' debut, The Witch, came out this year, which was amazing, and that was such a close second for me. But I also really loved Fede Alvarez's Don't Breathe, and I also loved Anna Biller's The Love Witch, which is a lesser known film, but yeah, I absolutely loved that movie. But I'm going to choose Conjuring 2 as my first pick, because I do think, once again, it was just doing great things for horror, and I actually found it really scary.
So this is the time that we were doing the podcast.
Yeah.
So for the next couple of years, like it's going to be that period. I almost chose The Witch as well, because I really like The Witch. I think it's a great film. I have actually chosen a film that maybe a lot of people have not heard of, which is a film called The Wailing. It's a Korean film.
Yeah.
I also saw it at the London Film Festival,
Nice.
as in fact I did see The Witch at the London Film Festival as well.
Yeah.
And I hadn't seen it for about 10 years until I rewatched it very recently just to remind myself, because it was a very hard choice.
Yeah.
And essentially the film is about it's based in a small town in Korea, and the main character is a policeman, and he's investigating a series of strange events where people seem to be becoming possessed or ill. And it may be because of a Japanese man who has moved into the town. So it may be linked to him. Now, that doesn't sound like much, but where it goes from there, I think is awesome. And the last 20 or 30 minutes is like absolutely devastating. Without wanting to spoil it too much. The Koreans have this way of basically making a film and not trying to be too negative, but a lot of these kind of horror films you see are very kind of one note. They're just very much like, here's a group of people, they go to a spooky house, spooky stuff happens, and that's it. Whereas like a Korean film, it might have bits that are, played for laughs, and it might have sad bits, and it'll have, very kind of scary bits. And they just managed to have these kind of blend of different genres and tones that seem to work really well. You got obviously Parasite, and then in 2000 you had like Old Boy and Memories of Murder and all these films that are just awesome. And like The Wailing is one of them. So that's one I would recommend. I mean, I love The Witch as well. Yeah. The Wailing has this to a certain extent, but The Witch definitely is a folk horror film. And we already mentioned, Field in England. Yeah. And there are a few other films that are kind of coming up which have folk horror elements, if not full-blown folk horror, like Midsummer and things like that. So, that's something that's become, it's come back, basically, in the 2010s, because obviously you had Blood on Satan's Claw, you had The Wicker Man, and, it was there or thereabouts, but it's come back full force since then. So I find that quite interesting.
It is interesting. I feel like it's a great genre for Britain as well, I love a bit of British horror, and
it's definitely something that's kind of come back kind of full force, I would say. All right, 2017.
Yeah, I was actually thinking that couple of years when we were recording the podcast back then was actually really good few years for horror there.
Yeah, I know.
When I'm looking at these, the one that we just spoke about, 2016, and then 2017, it's like there's quite a lot to choose from. So 2017 was another tough year to choose my favorite, but I'm going to go with, and this surprises me even, but I'm going to go with the It remake, directed by Andy Muschietti. Is that how you say his surname? But this was really tough because I'm going to put second as Get Out by Jordan Peele, which I was just so teetering on putting that as my first because it's amazing, but I'm going to go with the It remake as my first. An honourable mention to a bit of a lesser known movie, which I absolutely love, is Hounds of Love by Ben Young.
Yeah, I remember we talked about it on the podcast. So this is when we were full on doing the podcast, because I remember all this.
Yeah.
And I chose Get Out as my favourite film back then. And I would still go with Get Out as my favourite film of 2017. Yeah, for the reasons that you said, because I think it's quite influential in a lot of horror that we see now in ways that I'm going to go on to in a bit. But very, very, great film. Don't think really you say a lot more than that. Interesting that you say It, because Stephen King has had a bit of a revival. I've noticed. So got It, Dr. Sleep, Gerald's Game, the Pet Sematary remake, Salem's Lot. There was a new version of that.
Salem's Lot, Carrie.
There's always every 10 years or so there'll be like a new version of Carrie. Seems to be the way it goes. But
always a big fan of Stephen King based movies. So
I think there'll always be sort of Stephen King movies, but seems to be the way it goes. Like it's like Mike Flanagan, I think, has sort of brought him back.
Yeah.
And it as well. I mean, it's mainly it because it made so much money. But like,
yeah.
Are you who do you prefer, Tim Curry or Bill Skarsgård? Who's better?
Well, I do really like them both, and I think it's great to see those two different flavors of Pennywise. But I'm going to go with Tim Curry because for me, like that original like film for TV movie was just started me in horror. You know, it wasn't the first horror movie that I watched, but it was definitely up there with like one of the first, and it really switched me onto horror, and I found that absolutely terrifying at the time. So it's like etched in my memory like so strongly.
Yeah, I remember watching it on Sky back in the day, and yeah, it's the same because we're about that age where we would have watched that. Cool. So 2018, we're coming to the end of the 2010s, but it's still a lot of great horror. Out at this time. So what have you gone for?
Again, this year just feels like it was so rich with horror. It's like really hard to choose. I've got like 4 titles here that I was back and forth on, but I'm going to go with them, and maybe we even have the same pick here because this was like an iconic movie of 2018, but I'm going to go with Hereditary by Ari Aster. I would also like to give a mention to my second choice was A Quiet Place, directed by John Krasinski. I absolutely love that movie, and yeah, like I said, so difficult to choose. It got Revenge in this year by Coralie Farge, and Ghost Stories. It was directed by Andy Nyman and Jeremy Dyson, which is a British directed movie, which maybe some people haven't heard of. But if you haven't seen that, please do watch it because it's incredible.
Yeah, I have gone for Hereditary as well. I think Hereditary
yes,
definitely the best. Wow, it's my favorite as well, but it is also the best.
I didn't even give the mention to Argentina's Terrified, directed by Damien Rugner.
That's good as well.
So good. So this was such a good year, but Hereditary was like next level.
Yeah. Very, very difficult to argue against Hereditary. Just everything about it, just the production design, just the unease that the film creates sort of throughout, the acting in it is weird to talk about horror films with like great acting in it. People talk about to this day like, oh, you know, they should have had Oscar nominations for the acting in it.
It was incredible.
So yeah.
I mean, this was another change of direction for horror where we started to come back more to kind of the cult sort of vibes, especially with Ari Aster. He loves to have a film about
cults.
Yeah, he absolutely loves it.
That he loves, cults making a bit of a comeback.
And I remember watching this. I actually did watch it in a Cineworld, and I was on a row entirely by myself, and the cinema was pretty empty. I don't know why. I think I must have seen it just slightly after the release day, and that made it even more terrifying. I remember all the promotion or marketing before this came out was saying that this was going to be the new Exorcist of our time.
Yeah.
And I kind of see where they're coming from with that. But yeah, if you haven't seen this movie, you need to see that to understand why.
Yeah, that type of marketing's not super helpful, if I'm being honest. But, oh well. Other films that you've not mentioned that came out in 2018 was new Halloween, David Gordon Green.
Yes.
And also a small movie you might have heard of called Terrifier.
Yeah.
By Damien Leone, which we covered on the pod, and we had a great time talking about it.
Yeah.
And it's so kind of cool, bear in mind we talked about, this little kind of small, low budget film with like this clown and he saws a woman in half kind of the wrong way.
Yeah.
And like, wasn't that awesome? And now, it's become this kind of phenomenon.
Yeah, it's really grown, and now we're on the 3rd one. So yeah.
Yeah, and there's going to be more. But that kind of ties into something that you brought up earlier is there seems to be I think it's because of Halloween mainly, but this kind of explosion of slasher films in the last few years. So Halloween, Scream, the Terrifier films, Thanksgiving by Eli Roth, X by Ty West, and others. There's so many. And they're like pretty good as well, a lot of them for like what they are. So, I mean, I have my opinions as to why I think that is. So, what do you think? Why are slashers all of a sudden they come back in vogue? Because like people were making slashers the whole time since the 90s and early 2000s, but it seems to become very, very popular now.
I think so it kind of comes in cycles, and we had this kind of remake surge or like nostalgia surge in every aspect of things. We're talking fashion, music, and also film, and that carries through to the horror genre or niche of films. And I think it came off the back of like the 80s nostalgia. And I think there was a lot of that, you had like Stranger Things. But I think with that 80s nostalgia comes the slasher territory. And I think, like you say, torture porn, like with, Saw and Hostel franchises, like really kind of digging into that sort of torture porn popularity. That kind of had its time, and then we've like looped back around to slasher, which is kind of similar but different. So I think it came from the 80s nostalgia and wishing that we could go back to that time in terms of horror movies, which was such a great era for horror. There's so many good releases and like new original material.
Yeah, and I think as well, what you're finding is you're getting slasher films where it's not just a slasher film. It's basically like, it's almost like an elevator pitch. It's Scream mixed with this other film. So The Final Girls is it's Friday the 13th mixed with Last Action Hero.
Yeah.
Or you'll get a Happy Death Day, which is Groundhog Day mixed with Scream.
Yeah.
Or there's another film that I'm struggling to remember, but it was a similar thing. It was basically like Back to the Future meets Scream.
Yeah.
Totally Killer.
Yeah, I remember that one. Yeah.
So yeah, it's basically you can take a slasher, but then you can combine it with something else to make like a hybrid.
Yeah.
As well, and I think a lot of people are doing that now.
Yeah.
Even Kevin Williamson made, I don't know if you've seen this, Sick, which is basically a slasher, but it's set during COVID.
No, I've not actually seen that one.
It's pretty good. It's pretty good. I do recommend it. It's very him in a lot of ways, but yeah. So yeah, more slasher films. You can never get enough of slasher films.
You can never have enough of them.
2019, so the last year of the 10s at this point.
So again, another great year for horror. I think you're going to be surprised at my first choice.
Wow, you said Saw 3D, so I don't think I can be surprised by anything that you say now.
It's a little off kilter. I've gone with the more independent, lesser known British choice with this one. And it's a favourite local director of mine who I love. And I've chosen In Fabric by Peter Strickland.
Okay.
Now, this was such a big year for horror, and I really struggled with choosing my first choice because up second we have Us by Jordan Peele, which was phenomenal, and it's probably like the mainstream like number one choice of the year. But then alongside that, you also have Midsummer by Ari Aster. So it is so hard to choose, but I'm going to go with In Fabric because I really love Peter Strickland's work, and this movie, like visually, I just feel like it's just amazing. And don't get me wrong, I love all three of those movies, but yeah, I'm going to go In Fabric with this choice.
Cool. That's definitely an interesting choice. I've gone for Lighthouse by Robert Eggers.
Nice.
I think it's a great film. It's just got so much atmosphere to it. Just the way it's shot by Jaron Blaschke, his regular cinematographer. It's black and white. It's in the square frame. Yeah. You've got Willem Dafoe, who's obviously awesome and steals the show, but Robin Pattinson is good as well.
Yeah.
And yeah, it feels very off kilter as well. I think it's his best film and it's his weirdest film as well by far. His other films obviously are good. I like them, but they're not as weird as Lighthouse. It's just him being very, very weird. I love it.
I actually managed to catch that at London Film Festival in 2018, which was October, and it was incredible. And Robert Pattinson and Willem Dafoe were amazing in it. It's such a cool movie. I actually watched another movie with Robert Pattinson in last night, that new Mickey 17 movie.
Oh, right.
Not a horror, but very cool.
Awesome. So we haven't mentioned it yet. We've kind of mentioned Blumhouse. Obviously, the other big studio that came to prominence during the 20s, A24.
Yeah.
And with A24, basically other people make films and they buy them and they distribute them. So it's a bit different from the Blumhouse model, although they have started making their own films as well.
Yeah.
And without wanting to I don't want to spend too long obviously talking about this, but obviously you have Neon now, and Neon to me feel like A24 like 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Because A24 are trying to basically expand and make bigger films. Like they made Civil War, which is huge for them, film like $50 million. They're doing that film with Timothée Chalamet, directed by Josh Safdie. I forget. It's one of the Safdie brothers. And that's this very expensive film about a ping pong player.
Okay.
Not quite sure how that's going to make money. They're banking on Timothée Chalamet alone to kind of sell that one. But yeah, I obviously have a lot of affection for A24.
Same.
However, as a kind of consequence of this and Get Out, what we've seen, particularly in the media, is this term elevated horror.
Yeah.
I don't like that term at all. And I think there are consequences to that. So first of all, how do you feel about these kind of films as a screenwriter as well, who's trying to make horror films?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really glad that we've got like both Blumhouse and A24, and they both feel so prominent. The interesting thing about the difference with the two is Blumhouse mainly sticks to kind of thriller and horror, and they're like really big in horror. But with A24, it's kind of unpredictable. You get a lot of these like weird offbeat dramas, or you had films such as like Everything Everywhere All at Once, which are just wildly different. And then they have their own kind of brand of horror, which does feel a little bit more like maybe art house sort of style. So maybe don't love the term elevated horror, but I see where they're coming from. And I think the quality of the movies that they always put out there is usually pretty quirky, usually quite offbeat, and it's usually something that I want to watch. And like, I really love pretty much all the material that they've put out there, and I'll watch like A24 movies.
So if you see a film advertiser you've never heard of and you see it's an A24 film, are you more likely to watch it because it's A24 versus if it's not? Let's put it that way.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I feel like they are quite different to like Blumhouse, and they've got a different approach to things. But yeah, I usually like really end up enjoying whatever it is that they've chosen to put out there.
Yeah. Now, the reason I say that there's kind of a flip side to this as well, and I could literally dedicate a whole episode of a podcast to this if I wanted to. There's basically where this term elevated horror, where basically it goes wrong, essentially. So when it goes right, yes, you get films like Get Out or Hereditary. But when it goes wrong, you get something like the remake of Black Christmas.
Okay.
Now, by that, what I mean, so essentially, elevated horror is essentially, well, it's like Jenna Ortega said at the start of Scream, it's basically, well, you have horror, but there's more to it than that, because it explores like familial trauma and things like that. And I think now we're seeing a lot of films where instead of that being like something you could read into it, that's what the film is. Oh, and by the way, it's a horror film as well. And it kind of forgets to be scary. So the reason I pick on the Black Christmas remake, first of all, because it's very bad. Yeah. But also it's like, okay, you want to make a film about, you know, the patriarchy and kind of, you know, Me Too, essentially, because that's what the film's about. Okay, that's cool. I have no issue with that at all. But it's like, you've made a bad horror film in service of that, instead of making a good horror film with the undertone of, okay, this is what it's actually about.
Yeah.
I also have a problem with The Invisible Man by Lee Winnell for a similar reason, because I won't go into it because I don't want to hijack the show. But yes, I have a similar issue with The Invisible Man. And apparently the Wolfman, his Wolfman film that came out this year has the same issue where it's like, he's not made a scary film. It's like, I want to make a film about this. And then he's put the allegory out there.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen both of those movies. I love Lee Winnell. I loved The Invisible Man.
I thought Upgrade was his best film because that's, I'm sure there's allegory in there, but it's basically RoboCop.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I loved Upgrade. I loved The Invisible Man. Not so keen on Wolfman. I watched that, a month ago or so.
So, but yeah. 2020, not a good year for humanity. Period. Definitely not a good year for horror films. Very slim pickings. So I'm curious as to what you've gone with here.
Oh, I've actually got some good titles here, like surprisingly, considering we spend most of it at home in lockdown. But my first pick of 2020 is Promising Young Woman, which is directed by Emerald Fennell. And this was her featured debut. She got discovered like as a writer and director as well, but on this thing called the blacklist, which is for screenwriters is kind of one of those things where it's very sought after that you would be discovered on this as like unrepresented or unknown talent. And, you know, she had an outstanding script that was on there. And then off the back of that, they made Promising Young Woman, which I think is an incredible movie and has some very dark tones to it. I did, however, I had a hard time choosing because there are another couple of movies that year that I really loved as well. So second to Promising Young Woman, I would go with The Hunt, which is directed by Craig Zabel. And I think this is an awesome movie, once again, because of that final girl feel, which is definitely prominent in Promising Young Woman and is definitely in The Hunt. And also the third pick, which you've also just mentioned, is Leigh Whannell's The Invisible Man, which again has another strong female role in it. There's a bit of a turning point here for the kind of final girl theme where it was turned on its head and they've taken back the power. And I thought this was an incredible year for strong female-centric roles. And I love all three of those movies, but Promising Young Woman is my top pick.
Interesting. I have picked a different film. So I picked a film called The Empty Man by David Pryor, which a lot of people might not have heard of.
I actually haven't seen that.
Okay. So I first heard about this on Chris Stuckman, his YouTube channel, because he saw it and he really liked it and he promoted it. And essentially, it starts off, you've got two couples in the mountains. One of the guys falls into a sort of cavern, as you do.
Unfortunate.
There's a statue and it causes him to kind of go into like a trance, and he's in a trance for about 3 days. And then, things happen, let's just say, and then it cuts to a seemingly unrelated character who's James Badge Dale, who is I think he's a retired policeman or he's a private detective. He's looking for the daughter of a friend of his who has gone missing. And it's worth watching. It's very different. If you like kind of films that are, again, it's got cults in it. So that's a good sign. I just found it very, very interesting. I'm quite interested to see what the director does next. It's quite long. It's about 2.5 hours.
Okay.
But it goes into some very interesting places. It's to do with, if you like cosmic horror, that's another thing that's sort of a bit more prominent these days. It kind of touches on that sort of thing as well. But yeah, you would have probably watched all those films on streaming, wouldn't you? What streaming services do you have?
So currently, I still really enjoy Netflix. I kind of dip in and out of Shudder. It's good sometimes, but I find that with a lot of stuff on that, I've seen all the classics, and then the new stuff that was coming out, there wasn't enough of it. So I kind of went off it for a bit, went back on it. I will occasionally purchase things from Apple, especially if I want to watch something, in particular that is only released on there, because they've started releasing their own like big titles. Like recently they did that one that was at London Film Festival called Blitz. It's not horror, but an incredible movie. And I guess the occasional thing on Amazon Prime, but I sort of heavily rely on Netflix, and then I seek out other things that I'll see at the cinema, or I'll just sort of cherry pick what I want to watch.
Yeah, but you go to the cinema a lot, though.
Yeah, I go to the cinema.
Compared to a lot of people. Like
sort of 2 or 3 times a week.
Wow, that's how you end up watching so much stuff, yeah. I mean, I have never really had Netflix. I may have had it years ago. I, at the moment, I've had Shudder as well. I have the same experience as you, where it's great until you watch everything. And then it's like, okay, nothing else for me to see now. I mainly use Tubi, which I've told you about before. It's by Fox, and basically it's free. So you just sign up to it, and just the only thing you need to be aware of is the films have ads.
Yeah.
But there's ways around that. And if you have a VPN, you can use it to watch all the stuff in America. Tubi is now available in the UK, but the library they have in America is just huge. It's thousands upon thousands of them. There's too much to watch, and it covers all the decades. You'll have like these very cheap kind of exploitation films from like the 60s on there. It's great. It's the only streaming service that I really use. I mean, I'm on Mubi as well.
Yeah.
which is pretty good. But the reason I kind of ask all this is because now we're at the point where I think streaming is a lot of people's preferred way of watching films, which it wasn't before. And we talked about these kind of, when I was talking about low budget American horror films, they might appear now on Shudder as opposed to just being shown at, I don't know, a film festival, be it Fright Fest or any similar festival, and then you will never see it again. Or it will appear on DVD in like 2 years.
Yeah.
So it has its pros and cons, I think.
I mean, I can totally understand, especially recently, why people would avoid going to the cinema as well, because there's just this huge issue at the moment with people who are not able to put their phone in the bag for the full duration of a movie, where they literally have
I've
it
seen
out.
you ranting about this on social media.
Oh God, don't get me started on this. It's so bad. It's like such a terrible addiction problem.
It's bad,
that like people literally.
This is why I only go to screenings with about 3 other people, and I avoid prime time, period.
It really ruins the movie, because it just, like, what happens is you'll end up sat 1 or 2 seats away from someone who has their phone out in front of them for the entire movie with the screen lit up, maybe even the sound on as well. And literally all they're doing is scrolling like Instagram, social media, TikTok, watching videos, but not watching the movie. So yeah, I mean, I can see why people might decide that they're not going to go to the cinema anymore.
And it's expensive as well.
Yeah, and this could lead to the death of cinema, which is not great, because we've seen a lot of closures, like even since COVID finished. We've seen a lot of closures of cinema, and it's quite worrying that we might not be able to get those experiences of watching with the crowd anymore. Like that's sad.
Yep. And Sean Baker talked about this in his Oscar acceptance speech a week or 2 ago. 2021, so we're still in COVID.
Yeah.
Again, not great sort of number of great. I don't know. I had a lot of difficulty trying to find a film from 2021, but.
So I actually have 4 notable films this year that I liked. It was a difficult year, and this film is my number 1 choice. And I actually kind of got lucky with this movie, but it still sits in this year, even though there was some difficulty with releasing it. But what happened was, I think it was literally a day before lockdown or something, I got a special preview screening of this movie and I went to watch it. And then we got locked down, whether it was like the first lockdown or the second lockdown, I can't remember. I think it was the first one, the very first one. So I would have seen it a year before everyone else in 2020. And then it actually properly got a real release delayed in 2021. So it's A Quiet Place Part 2. So I saw it 2020, but I actually went back and saw it again in 2021 because a year had passed since I first saw it. And this is directed by John Krasinski, and really loved this movie. I think the 3 of these movies in the franchise are all solid and so great, just love it. Other mentions and second choice this year is probably the Candyman remake, which I know some people who are loyal to the original, which I am, don't like, but I liked this new version of a classic, and that's directed by Nia DaCosta. Also loved this year Edgar Wright's Last Night in Soho, which I also watched, I think it was the year prior at London Film Festival. So I was lucky enough to see him introducing it there at London Film Festival. And also we had another female British director who brought out Saint Maud, directed by Rose Glass, which was a very notable film of that year. And if you haven't seen that, I highly recommend it, because that's an excellent debut feature horror movie.
Yeah, I like Saint Maud as well. That's not what I've gone for, though. Okay. So I had a really tough time trying to pick something. So I have gone for The Night House, which is directed by David Bruckner. Now, this is one of those films that I kind of mentioned earlier when talking about, like, there's a lot of films now that are essentially just about grief.
Yeah.
And people processing grief and things like that. So essentially the film is Rebecca Hall, her husband has just committed suicide, and she's basically trying to deal with that. And she's contacted by him, essentially, as a ghost. There's more to it than that, but I think Rebecca Hall's awesome. I think she's the most underrated actress of our time. And David Bruckner, he's a solid director. I wouldn't say he's great, but I think he's very good at what he does. even the Hellraiser remake, may as well talk about that because it's Lament Configuration, I thought was okay.
Yeah, it's decent.
Definitely better than a lot of the recent Hellraiser films. Let's put it that way. I wasn't blown away by it, but he is a very good director and he's someone who I think could go on to bigger and better things. Other than that, another film I was thinking about, because obviously we love our video nasties, is Censor.
Yeah.
So I thought we could do that for the lulz, which is a female-directed horror film, and of which in the 2020s there are a lot more female-directed horror films out there compared to, even 10 years ago. So, I mean, the Palme d'Or in 2021 was won by Julie Ducournau, for Titan. She directed Raw as well, which is really good. I prefer Raw to Titan, but I mean, they're both good films.
Yes,
what you mentioned, Coralie Farger, lots of female horror directors out. So this must be great for someone like you. Well, for you, not just because you're a woman, but there's more options out there. More
for
voices.
Sure. Yeah, definitely love to see that. I actually know Prano Bailey-Bond personally. I've seen her at different screenings.
Oh, okay.
I've chatted with her at length at parties and things. She's such an amazing person. And slang, there goes the name dropping. But absolutely Prano Bailey-Bond stan.
You talk about video nasties. You say, hey, I did a podcast. It talked about 72 of these films.
I actually don't think we got onto that topic, but we just talked about. Yeah, I should have mentioned that too. I'm sure I'll bump into
maybe
her
next
again.
time.
Yeah, but I too watched Censor that year, and I loved it. I think I managed to get to a screening where she was introducing it, but I'm struggling to remember now because of the lockdown situation. I think I did. I remember getting a free poster there with Censor on it.
Yeah, cool. 2022. So post-lockdown, there's more choice. I think it definitely improved. We mentioned this earlier, but yeah.
Yeah, it started to pick up again. I think there was a bit of a lull at one point, wasn't there? And then it started to pick up again. Also started to be able to kind of go back out more to the cinema more at this point.
Which you obviously took massive advantage of.
Yeah, I did. But this was another tricky year to decide. I had two front runners in this one, but I've gone with my first choice. I really loved this movie when I watched it and went into it not knowing what to expect, but Barbarian by Zach Cregger. And my second choice, which is really close, is Nope, directed by Jordan Peele. And I'd also like to give an honourable mention to The Menu, which was directed by Mark Mylod, which I really loved. I think that's an awesome movie.
Yeah, I also went for Barbarian, which is a Fright Fest film.
Yeah.
So I think it was the closing night film, or no, it wasn't the closing night film. I think it played on the Saturday, but it was like a headlining type film at Fright Fest.
Yeah.
And I was like you, I watched it. I was like, oh, okay, it's got Bill Skarsgård in it, and you think, oh, is he going to be because, two people, in a Airbnb situation, you think because he's played villains before, you think, but then it goes a totally different direction, and it's really cool. I rewatched it recently. I had a lot of fun with it.
I love that movie.
I'm quite excited to see what he does next, but unfortunately the next thing that the director Zach Cregger he's doing next is another Resident Evil movie. Do we need another one of those? We had 7 of those before Paul W.S. Anderson.
I don't know. But I'm excited to see what else he makes, but hopefully he does something else original as well, like after the Resident Evil.
I'm quite curious to see what he does after that. Hopefully that Resident Evil movie does really well and he can get a lot of money to make something original, like you said.
Yeah.
Barbarian does have what I think is it has a few kind of modern horror cliches.
Yeah.
So you've got someone being cancelled.
Yeah.
You've got an Airbnb. You've got someone who I think the main character works for a podcast off the top of my head. I'm pretty sure that's her job.
Was she a journalist?
Well, she's a journalist. It's like a modern journalist.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we were trying to think, earlier when we were talking about doing this of some modern kind of horror cliches, like how in the 80s you would have a character who's like a bimbo and a jock. Whereas now you get characters who are podcasters or influencers.
Yeah. Happens a lot.
A lot of social media based things going on.
Yeah. A lot of the kind of modern technology spins for horror these days.
Or even you get films like Unfriended or Host, which are, Zoom. Well, I mean, Unfriended isn't on Zoom, but it's basically a screen share kind of horror type situation, sort of new technology for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, in the Halloween remake, the two characters at the start they have a true crime podcast. That's another thing that's sort of fairly new that I've seen come up in a few films.
Even Terrifier leaned into that. Yeah.
There's a character, a very annoying character, who gets killed in a very violent way in Terrifier 3.
Yeah.
Who's a true crime Sienna Shaw, come on our true crime podcast and talk about what happened to you. It's like, okay.
Yeah.
Or did you see Deadstream?
I don't think I watched that one.
Okay. The main character in that is very annoying, but it's kind of the same thing. It's like someone doing a live stream, essentially, in a haunted house. I'm surprised that hasn't been done earlier, to be honest, but yeah.
Yeah, maybe a little bit too cliche for my taste, but yeah.
But yeah, it just goes to show, like, this stuff is going to date very badly, I think.
Yeah.
In 10 years or so.
But yeah, absolutely love Bill Skarsgård in Barbarian and love Richard Brake as well. He's like one of my favourite horror actors.
Oh yeah, he's in that, isn't he?
I love it, yeah.
Yeah, he needs to be the new Freddy Krueger if they ever do another one, because he'd be great for it. 2023. So only, basically last year. It's not really last year, but it may as well be last year.
Yeah.
What have you gone for?
Yeah, so this again felt like a really good year for horror, and I was on the fence between 4 horror titles, which I'll mention. But for my top pick, I've gone with Talk to Me, directed by Danny and Michael Filippo. And this is another A24 movie. And this was released first off to streaming. And I absolutely loved this movie. I think it needed a bigger release than what it had. But, they're Australian filmmakers, so they probably got that there out in Australia and maybe even in America, but less so. We had it in the UK, but absolutely loved that. But a close second is Evil Dead Rise, which was directed by Lee Cronin, who I'm excited to see like what he does next. I mean, I'm really excited to see what the Filippo brothers do next as well. And they have something coming out fairly soon.
They're doing a sequel to it as well.
Yes, they're doing a sequel, but they're also doing something else that's like a new original title.
Yeah. I think that's also being released by 24. I could be wrong.
Yeah. And so they're working on those simultaneously. I also really enjoyed, you probably didn't like this, but Saw X.
I thought Saw 10 was quite good.
Kevin Gruter.
How dare you make assumptions?
Okay, fair. I thought you weren't going to like it. I mean, it had some bits in it that were a little bit cheesy.
It wasn't as good as Saw 3D, clearly.
Overall, I really enjoyed it. I actually thought it was maybe better than Saw 3D. Controversial. and another film, which if you've seen it, I think you'll really like, but it's another film by that Argentinian director called Damien Rugner, which is When Evil Lurks, which is a dark as a fuck.
Yeah, they're all good films. Even Saw 10 is good. That's not the one I've gone for. I've gone for Pearl by Ty West, which is the best film in the Mia Goth trilogy with Maxine, the Maxine Minx trilogy, I guess.
Yeah.
So you got X, which is pretty good. Quite enjoyed that, although it's obvious to see where kind of the influences are for that one. Maxine, I wasn't so much of a fan of. I wanted to like that more than I did. But Pearl is definitely, of the 3, the best. It's just a tour de force performance by Mia Goth. I think it's very clever the way that they work around sort of what would have been the COVID precautions when they were filming it at the time. I like, the way it looks, very Technicolor. Give me a horror film that isn't just dark.
Yeah.
I just found it very entertaining. So yeah, I enjoyed that one a lot. Another film that came out, Blumhouse film, is Megan. Yeah. That film came out, the sequel coming out this year, I believe, which sounds more interesting than the original film. But what that kind of got me thinking about is how Blumhouse seemed to be doing this a lot, where you have not robots, but you know what I mean, like kind of where you had the Child's Play remake of Megan, Five Nights at Freddy's, which I saw recently, I did not like.
It's kind of that AI vibe, sort of like
robotic kind
robotics,
of, Willy's Wonderland with Nicolas Cage as well. Like that type of stuff. And I guess it kind of makes me think, I think this is a lot of Blumhouse horror films that are being made seem to be in this mold. Like, I haven't seen it, but there's like Imaginary.
Yeah, I saw that. It wasn't great. Didn't love it. I think I would prefer something more like Megan and like Annabelle, which feels like it's in the same vein as like Child's Play.
Yeah, except Annabelle doesn't have like, as far as we know, it doesn't have like in robotics kind of going inside it. Or Afraid, that Blumhouse film as well. I don't know if that...
I watched that as well. It was...
Okay.
Yeah, it was decent. It wasn't amazing. So wasn't one that you'd watch again, like repeatedly.
Yeah. But I think this, again, is kind of the way that it seems to be I don't know if it's just Blumhouse, but Blumhouse seems to be moving in this direction of like, let's put like something animatronic in our films.
Yeah.
Make that either the hero or the villain or vice versa,
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of AI themes coming out, but that kind of riffs on a lot of like real life fears at the moment.
Well, yeah, this is what horror is useful for, is to kind of, take these kind of fears that people have, and like AI is like a legit thing that people are scared of. I mean, I'm scared of it.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but I'm in my job, like it could take my job quite easily.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, yeah, we want AI for things that are useful, not, trying to create scripts and make art. Two things that you're doing.
Yeah.
It must be quite frustrating to see like people just using this shit looking AI art,
I know. It's kind of one of those things where you either need to lean into it and sort of use it in a way that is useful, but there needs to be like definite boundaries with, definitely with my creative work, which is the day job, and then with passion projects and other things that I do like acting and screenwriting. It's scary in all three aspects of that.
There you go. So fuck AI.
Yeah, we want AI to do the boring shit.
Yeah, we want it to clean our houses.
Yeah.
Do the housework. Don't write films, please. Which brings us very nicely to last year, 2024.
Yeah, again, I thought this was an excellent year for horror. I have 3 notable titles written down, and my favourite of last year, of 2024, is definitely Heretic, directed by Scott Beck and Brian Woods. My second choice, which I actually saw at London Film Festival in the end of 2023, so I got ahead with this one, was Late Night with the Devil, directed by Cameron and Colin Cairns. And I also really loved Longlegs, directed by Osgood Perkins, which has been a great revival for his work and just something new and different for him that is definitely leading to really good things.
So if you're 2 guys making a horror film, Ria's probably going to like it.
They're all duos except for Osgood.
Yeah. So, and then Raka guys, talk to me as well, So I do not have 2 people directing my favorite horror film of last year. It is a woman, Coralie Varger, who directed The Substance, which was shown at Fright Fest. It's the headliner.
I saw it at Fright Fest.
Oh, there you go.
And she was there to introduce it, and it was absolutely amazing. I mean, I know I didn't put it in my top 3, but I loved that movie as well. It's a good choice. This
was actually kind of difficult in a way because, like you said, a lot of good films came out last year. Mm-hmm. You mentioned 3 of them.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think The Substance kind of stood out. It sort of got a very different vibe from a lot of the other horror films that came out. It's leaning into, it's very, you can tell it's been written by a woman.
Yeah.
I'll just say that. And I mean that not in a pejorative way at all. I mean that in a man could not have made this film. Yeah. And that's great. Because I say, I like diversity kind of different ideas.
Yeah.
And things like that. And great, not Oscar winning, Golden Globe winning performance by Demi Moore.
Amazing.
Margaret Qualley, I think she should have been nominated for Best Supporting Actress because she's really good.
Yes.
You need those 2 performances to kind of balance each other out. Otherwise the film doesn't work. Like the way the film looks. Dennis Quaid is great as well, eating shellfish.
Yeah.
And being creepy.
So good.
And I think people being like really kind of disgusted and offended. It's like, you guys clearly haven't seen any like Frank Henenlotter movies, and you haven't seen Reanimator. Come on, like we've seen like the really gory shit. This is, don't get me wrong. Yes, it is a bit disgusting. It's really not that disgusting, though.
I love a divisive movie like that, though. There were actually people who walked out of The Substance who just couldn't handle it, and I love a divisive movie like that. I think if that's what happens, then you're doing something right.
Yeah, definitely. But what it shows is that, the new trend, at least if Sundance is anything to go by this year, is body horror. Body horror is back, but with a female sort of gaze.
Yes.
Put it that way. So, I mean,
enjoying the female-centric, like female empowerment themes. This is great. It's exactly what I want to see.
Yeah. So there was a film that I saw which is on Shudder now called Grafted, which is, again, it's a body horror film directed by a woman. And even at Sundance this year, there were 2, I think, new films that are just being described as body horror. One of which was definitely directed by a woman, which was getting, I can't remember the name off the top of my head, sorry. But like, I think this is interesting because back in like the 80s or the 90s, or even the 70s, a film would come out and then unscrupulous exploitation producers would try and rip it off immediately as fast as possible, try and get a film into production. Like it happened, in Italy. Italy's quite notorious for this. You've got that film which is called Terminator 2, which is not Terminator 2 at all. It's actually an Aliens ripoff, directed by Bruno Mattei. That's just an example I can think of. I don't think this is happening because films take so long to make. So do you think it's a case like I do where these are screenplays that have maybe been around for a while, but now, there's this film that's out that's this idea. So let's make this now while there's an appetite for like a female sort of centered body horror film, for example. Is that what's going on here?
Well, so I think so, but I think a lot of it is that people are influenced by similar things at similar times. And you might notice that there'll be like 2 movies quite similar theme-wise that will come out around the same time. And people will be wondering, has one of them been influenced by the other? But the thing is, with the lead time that you need to like make a movie, plan a movie, and actually shoot it all and do all the post-production, it's not possible to like see one movie and then rush one out so soon afterwards. So they were clearly like came from the same ideas of probably things that were happening at the time or something that had been watched like from years ago. So it almost feels quite coincidental. But it's kind of impossible to rush something out like really soon afterwards. Like maybe a year later you could put something out, but not in a case of like weeks or months.
Yeah, it's just an interesting coincidence, I think, that I've noticed. Cool. So that's our last 15 years.
Well, I mean, I've actually put down some notes for 2025.
Yes, you did. I forgot. Sorry about that. So, Ria, because she watches so many films these days, I mean, I've only seen Nosferatu, so that would win for my 2025 so far.
Yeah.
But I mean, you've seen more than just Nosferatu and Companion. I saw that as well, and that was pretty good.
Yeah. So, we're only sort of we're like a quarter of the way into 2025. So hopefully there's much more to come.
Oh yeah, there'll be loads more.
But my top pick so far would be The Monkey, which brings us back to Osgood Perkins, but also with James Wan on board with Atomic Monster and also Stephen King. So it's like a triple sort of powerhouse there.
It's bringing like things that we've talked about in the last couple of hours together.
Yeah, and I've seen this movie twice already this year. I really, really liked it. Absolutely love this movie. So highly recommend The Monkey if you haven't seen it. And I'm going to give an honorable mention to Companion as well, directed by Drew Hancock. I'm excited to see like what else is coming from Osgood Perkins. I'm excited to see what else is coming from Drew Hancock. And it's like good stuff so far.
Yes, I'm excited to see what comes out for the rest of the year as well. Now, before we close off the episode, we wanted to kind of give a shout out to our 3 favourite directors and some less known, more up and coming or underrated directors as well. So, Ria, do you want to give yours first?
Yeah, so probably for my top 3 of the era that we've discussed, I will go with the unmistakable James Wan, because I just feel like he's had such an influence on everything that we've discussed today. And yeah, amazing guy. I think as well, I have to mention Ari Aster and Jordan Peele, and they're three such strong directors for this time. And yeah, I would just love to see them put more material out there.
Okay. I mean, I also have Ari Aster. I mean, love Hereditary, really like Midsommar.
Yeah.
Bo's Afraid was an interesting experiment. I can see why it kind of went the way it did.
Yeah.
And people didn't really get it. That happens with a lot of films that turn out to be cult classics later on. I mean, we lost David Lynch earlier in this year. And a lot of his films, that's kind of what happened to them. They came out like Twin Peaks Firewalk with Me, for example, where it came out, people hated it. But then over time, more and more people watch it and can see it, with the distance of, these things. So yeah, maybe that'll happen with Bo's Afraid. I'm curious, his next film is a Western. So I'm wondering if he's going to move away from horror altogether, which I think would be a shame because he has a knack for horror.
Yeah.
Basic bitch stuff, but Robert Eggers, I guess.
Yeah.
I like all four of his films.
Yeah.
I'm interested to see his 13th Century Werewolf film that he's got coming up like in a couple of years.
Nice.
He's doing Labyrinth as well, which is interesting. I don't quite know how that's going to work out, but I'll watch it, obviously. And then for the third one, I'm going to throw a bit of a curveball here, and I'm going to say Jane Schönbrunn, who, if you don't know who they are, so they directed a film called We're All Going to the World's Fair, which I know you didn't like.
Yeah.
But I kind of liked what they were going for with it. I think what they do quite well is they make films which are, how do I put this? Like the meme, like, how are you doing, my fellow kids?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's sort of the opposite of that. So it's not like some 50-year-old man trying to write for young people. It's someone closer to their age writing sort of stuff which is, is more aimed at people who would be into like, YouTube videos or in I Saw the TV Glow, like being really, really into like a TV show they watched in the 90s.
Yeah.
And like getting really, really involved in their world. And I'm quite curious to see what they do next. They have announced they're making a film which they have described as a cross between Portrait of a Lady on Fire and Friday the 13th.
Wow.
So I'm curious how that's going to work.
Yeah.
So, but no, they are, how I try to think about it is, if they're making a film, am I excited to watch it, sight unseen, because they are the one directing it?
Yeah.
And that's the case for those three directors. So,
nice.
And then for the, I guess, underrated or up and coming, I don't know kind of how we agree on that. But who do you have?
Yeah, both of those categories really. But so I think I'll go with Scott Beck and Brian Woods, because before they directed Heretic, they were writing. So they wrote the Quiet Place trilogy. And it was just so well, put together. And
they did a slasher film as well, I think, off the top of my head. Haunt?
Yeah.
I think is them as well.
Yes. And, now they've directed Heretic. It's gone down really well. And I'm really excited to see what they do next. So they've moved more into directing, and I think they're going to start to do that more. I hope they will. So I think, like I mentioned already, Filippo Brothers, I was really blown away by Talk to Me, and I'm excited to see what they're putting out. These guys have got such a lot of energy that they're literally like, I listened to the podcast with both of them on, and it's like ADHD contained into a podcast. It's like incredible. I don't think these guys sleep. They just make movies. So excited to see what they put out there. And I really want to see Emerald Fennell like do something else. And it saddens me that there aren't more women on this list. But I definitely want to see more like female directed dark thrillers and horror. And I really loved Emerald Fennell's film, so I want to see something else. But yeah, I mean, I could just keep on going. Osgood Perkins, I see good things coming from him. Zach Cregger, I want to see something else from him. Lee Cronin, Evil Dead Rise, like I loved it. And going back again to my previous point, Peter Strickland is so underrated. His films are so weird. Again, like in the vein of like David Lynch weird, but I just love what he does, and he's such a like underrated treasure in the UK, and I think everyone should watch his entire back catalogue of film.
He's kind of like Jess Franco weird, minus the sexploitation elements.
Yeah. But like if you haven't seen anything by Peter Strickland and you want to see something that he's made, like In Fabric is just I just thought it was outstanding. It's so cool.
Yeah. I agree with those as well. I mean, the ones I've chosen would be Panos Cosmatos, director of a film called Beyond the Black Rainbow, which I liked, and Mandy.
Love that
And
movie.
he's got a film in development starring Kristen Stewart and Oscar Isaac, which I'm hoping is in the same vein, because one thing with him that I'll say is, he made Beyond the Black Rainbow, had a style, whether you like that style or not is kind of not really the point, but then he made Mandy, which had Nicolas Cage in it. It's awesome, and is the similar style but slightly more developed and on a slightly bigger budget. So whatever he does, I'm going to watch it because I think it's awesome. Mentioned like you didn't have any women on your list. Shock horror.
Well, Emerald Fennell, yeah.
Oh yeah, okay. Well, you had one woman on your list. I stand corrected. I have one woman on my list as well. So there we go. We're equal. So I was expecting to hate the first Omen when I watched it because I'm like, oh right, so it's a prequel.
Yeah.
Is this going to be any good? One of the things that I haven't really talked about is people trying to crowbar in references to old films where it's not subtle. It's just kind of cringe, like in Alien Romulus, stuff like that. And there were aspects of that in the first Omen, but that's not the director's fault. So the director of the first Omen is Arkasha Stevenson. And I really liked the film for the most part because of the way it was directed, kind of the visual style of it. I thought compared that to a film like Immaculate, I thought
Great
First
movie.
Omen was, I much prefer the First Omen to Immaculate.
Yeah.
Basically.
I like them both. They're both really good.
So that was her first film. So I'm very curious to see what she does next. And let's say outside kind of shout, this could go horribly wrong. But there's a film that came out a couple of years ago that massively divided people. It's the most divisive film I've ever seen in my life. It's a film called Skinamarink. And it's directed by a Canadian, Kyle Edward Ball. Now, Skinamarink is either the most boring film you've ever seen in your life or it's the scariest film you've ever seen in your life.
And there's no in between.
There's literally no in between. It's basically, I don't think you've seen it.
I have.
Oh, you have seen it. Okay, fair enough. I stand corrected. But you can see why it would have that kind of...
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I think if you watch it as cinema in the dark and you're kind of forced to kind of watch...
And be immersed,
then the stuff that kind of would scare you would really scare you. But if you're not into it, it would just be like watching paint dry for 90 minutes.
Yeah, I'm leaning towards the paint dry vibe. Wasn't for me.
Which is fine.
I respect your choice.
But like the reason that I choose him is because he has a film coming out through A24. Now, I don't think he's going to do it in the same style as Skinamarink.
Yeah.
I think it will be a case of, similarly to a guy, Elias Mariga, who directed a film called Begotten in the early 90s. This kind of very weird black and white art house, sort of 70-minute horror film that's basically silent. That again, you either loved it or you hated it. But then he made a film called Shadow of the Vampire, which is basically like this reimagined sort of false history of kind of, Murnau directing Nosferatu, ironically, in 1922, if Max Schreck was a real vampire.
Yeah.
So I think it'll be like that. I think I'm curious to see what he does if he has to make, quote unquote, a proper film. That's not just, here's £5, just make something weird for like 90 minutes.
He's got a bit of money behind it to, go a bit further.
So yeah, if you make something a bit more conventional, it could go very well, or it could go horribly, horribly wrong, and this take looks hilarious sort of 10 years from now.
But
we'll see.
That would be interesting. I'll definitely check that out. Yeah, and me, I'm looking forward to seeing what films I write.
Well, yeah, no, exactly. So yeah, I'm very curious to see what you do.
Yes.
Hopefully by the end of 2029, we can look back and kind of go, okay, this is what happened sort of in the decade.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I hope you guys have enjoyed the show. I certainly have.
Yes.
If you liked the show, we have a whole catalogue of previous shows that you can listen to. We have 42 episodes, I believe.
Yeah.
Mostly on video nasties, but also kind of stuff like this where we're kind of talking about, films that were out at the time or kind of issues that were going on during 2016, 2017, that period. It's a time capsule in a way of that period.
Yeah, some highlights of the years that we did the podcast during, and some franchise specials where we talked about franchises that we like.
We did Hellraiser. We did a Hellraiser special, Child's Play. We covered the Evil Dead films.
Yeah.
We did a slasher film special, which I would do better now if we did that today, but never mind. It's still worth listening to, I promise. Incidentally, we haven't talked about the worst film of the last 15 years, but Hellraiser Revelation would surely be up there. But yeah, so anyway, we cover that on the show. So yeah, please listen to it. You can do that on Spotify. You can do it on iTunes. It's basically all over the place. I was quite good putting it up, as many places as you can. It's on YouTube as well.
It's on Apple Podcast, isn't it?
Yeah, it's on a lot of different places. So yeah, if you liked this and you want to hear us, younger, more innocent days talking about really violent video nasties, yeah, and some funny ones like we talked about earlier. As I said, that's please do that. I would appreciate it very much.
Yeah, and our Instagram and other social media for Lament Configuration Podcast is often at Lament Horror. So check us out on there as well for any details about previous episodes. But yeah, thanks for inviting me back, Greg. And
that's all right.
I have been Ria Fend, and you can also find me on Instagram, Twitter, which is now X, and I guess I've kind of tried to go on Threads. I'm not really using it that much, but mainly Instagram and Twitter X as at Ria_Fend. I'm also on Letterboxd as Ria Fend, and Greg is on Letterboxd as well if you would like to follow us and watch the latest films that we've been watching.
Yes, I am on Letterboxd as Worst 8 Movies Ever. I'm on X as Worst 8 Movies. I'm on Blue Sky as Worst 8 Movies as well. I don't really post very much, so if you want to follow me, I guess Letterboxd is kind of the best place to do that because that's kind of where I update what I watch the most. I watch a lot of films, not as much as Ria, apparently, but yeah, I watch a lot of films. So that's where you can find us. So yeah, thank you very much for doing the show. Yeah. I'm glad we did it.
Yeah,
it's been way too long. I don't know what happens from here. This could just be a one-off. If it is, then it's been an honor. And if it's not, then cool. Would be happy to do it again. If not, that's fine. And yeah.
Yeah, so we might...
last words?
Yeah, we might catch you again in the future. But yeah, I hope you've enjoyed this summary, and we'll see you out with some music from one of the films that we've mentioned in this episode.
And we mentioned a lot, so it could be anything.